What's going on, workforce? Brian and Chris here, and today we're diving into our expectations and hopes for the ranged melee for Endwalker. One of the roles that's not getting any job, obviously that that we know of. Yoshi P pulls a little third job out of his hat, on Friday. Who knows? We're hanging out. We're covering it live. If you guys want to be a part of that, link is in the description. Chris, what's up, dude?
I know. I'm having a great day. Super bummed that male bunnies can only be blue mages.
Oh man, that was the latest drama. I can't believe it.
If you create one, you actually start as a blue mage. MSQ
Right.
is hard. You can't go into any dungeons without a designated party.
That's right. It's
No roulettes.
it was such a moment. I've never heard Zeppelin swear so loud and so profane.
Throwing fish.
So, Chris, obviously, we've got Dancer, the last expansion, Bard, and Machinist. I think if I was going to speak as a non-main of any of these, but I thoroughly enjoyed Dancer, and I really enjoyed Machinist. But the question then comes back to Bard and the satisfaction or the lack of satisfaction with that job itself, with no new job being introduced to this role. What do you want to see? Whether it's with Dancer, Machinist, or Bard, or do you think they're all in a good, happy, healthy, safe place, and you just want more of the same with the roles, with the job?
So I can't speak to an in game on it, but I know a lot of people seem to adore Machinist in the state it's in. You see Machinist also getting used for a number of things, like being the job that people are using in Ultimates like Rich, because it's fairly straightforward to use at that level. You see it being used as one of the go-to jobs for these kind of Necromancer clears. So I think it's had a relatively useful place in people's rotation as having it as a job. Dancer, obviously with Dance Partner, is incredible. And I think both of them feel really good, like straight through. They feel good. They feel like they have a designated identity. They feel both visually and rotationally like, okay, it's doing something. I've got it. They feel like they're on pace. So I would like to see them continue. Bard is one that feels like I don't know if Bard knows what Bard is.
Yeah.
For over the course of Bard, from ARR to Heavensward to Stormblood.
It's gone under so many different iterations. And then when Dancer came on board, I think a lot of Bard mains felt like Dancer kind of stole a little bit of their thunder in terms of the utility that they brought to the scene. And that's where I think the biggest question is, what about Bard? What about Bard? In fact, that I think essentially I'd like to see some more identity. And the question is what identity would it be? I feel like Dancer kind of in a way has a little bit of healing aspect. It has the ability to heal. Bard used to, for those who were back here in the 2.0 and 3.0 era, they had the ability to raise with their limit break 3. So Bard was this hey, by the way, look what we can do as well. And so I think that, and maybe I'm wrong about the Heavensward aspect, because that's when they actually introduced the Machinist, because typically Bard was the first.
Bard was its own thing, limit breaks, till they made the limit breaks more universal. They used to feel like they had more personality. Bard was off on its own world, just being support, singing songs to people, serenading. It just did what it did. And now I don't really know. It's not a hunter from other games, right? It's not a marksman, an archer, but it's also not a bard.
Right.
It's not this I'm just gonna serenade my party until they're happy and wonderful. It's not a utility job either. So
they brought some of that back, because they cut it out even more in Shadowbringers from a context perspective, and then they did claw some of that back in terms of its songs, adding kind of an overall damage buff to the party. But I don't think to a degree that people are like, yeah, we got to bring a Bard.
So yesterday we filmed casters.
Yes.
And one of the things I said about Summoner is I would love to see Summoner move into offering a limited job set of extra things, like a masked carnival and cosmetics. I will say that Bard has some of the coolest cosmetics. Bard has the performance system.
Yes.
Bard is an example of how a job can
be more than just combat.
Be useful in the glamour space, and can have things outside of the combat system that are totally optional, that are just its own lore, its own fluff. It turns into its own thing. The performance system is this neat identity to the Bard that no other job has anything like that.
Bard was I think the biggest disappointment to me Like, and then if you leave the video, then you can be like, that asshole, what's happening? In terms that I thought it would, as an archer, I thought archer was primed to be able to support multiple soul crystals, to go the route of bard, but essentially go the route of ranger, which would be a Final Fantasy equivalent to a hunter in, you know, of what you would be thinking for World of Warcraft, where it's like, okay, cool, where bard is maybe more focusing on utility and support, but a hunter, a ranger, would be more focusing in on damage. And they somewhat tried that with bard back in Heavensward, where essentially the term bow mage, and that's what I see people in you know, the community and chat actually weighing in on, where you would turn on a stance and then your abilities actually had a cast time. So it's like you kind of had that, you know, and it increased your damage overall, and then you could work to weave your stance on and off when you needed to move versus when you wanted to, you know, output more damage overall. And then that got clawed back in Shadowbringer as Stormblood, and then in Shadowbringers it changed even more. So it feels like, I don't know, like I think if anything else, out of all the jobs, I would point to Monk and Bard as two of the jobs that they really haven't figured out what that actually means. Like, what does it mean to be a Bard? What does it mean to be a Monk in the content of Final Fantasy XIV, and how do they relate to the other jobs? So I think first and foremost, I hope that we get to see some thought, some investment into Bard. We see that happen. It doesn't have to be a complete overhaul like we see happen with like Machinist, because I think there are some really good themes they have there. I just like to see what is the purpose of Bard. And to the question I would ask you, I would love to see it. I honestly would love to see either Bard or Paladin get a battle race. Like, I don't think all the different, you know, within a certain spec need to have that same kind of thing, but that's just kind of where I fall, because all casters don't have a battle raise. So I think it'd be kind of interesting to see what that would look like in the health of the combat. Reaper would be an interesting choice too.
To give a melee a battle raise, so you have red mage back there, and then you have melee up close. Very interesting. Bard having some more utility to kind of claw back. The dancer is just such a clear choice, and in Prague, you know, you need a red mage, and so then there's your two ranged, and so if you have two ranged, two melee, like Bard just, sorry,
yeah.
I don't know what to tell you. And like, if you're looking to slam damage, like Black Mage is going to take that spot. And so like, it just very quickly, it's just hard to justify a Bard.
Yeah.
It's just hard to, and so I would love to see it get more identity, especially because like the bows look so good, and playing on a Bard, it moves so well, especially in like for leveling content. It feels fast. Like it feels like I'm constantly, it feels more mobile than Dancer. Like, even though Dancers are instant cast and have this enormous range, the animation feels like I should be closer than I really need to be.
Yeah. With
Bard, I feel like I can be way back. So like, I find myself on Bard not sitting still, and there is no reason to be moving. Like, I'm just moving because I can. It's like I almost think like Bard, it should be like, oh yeah, auto runs turned on Bard, and you have to use your movement keys to stop it. Like Bard just goes.
And on that note though, like that's why I recommend Archer as the starter job for Final Fantasy XIV, especially if you don't know what you want to play. If you're like, what should I play? I'm new, I want to figure it out. It's like, you know, honestly, Archer's fantastic because you can attack from a range, you can always be moving. I don't see a downside, you know. And then it's like, by the time you hit level 50 and you're like, oh, maybe I want to change it. Well, I got good news. You can go play Samurai. You can go play this. You can go like, there's all these other new jobs that open up for you. Oh, you hit 60 and you're tired of, Bard. Well, good news. Dancer, you can pick right up from Dancer and go from there. I don't see a downside to recommending the Archer, you know, for your starting job. If you don't know, like, if you're like, I want to be a Black Mage.
But like, if you're coming from WoW and you're like an expert and you're like, oh, I'm a hunter, I'll pick the Archer class.
I got bad news.
You know, we're seeing that with Bellular, where like, then he goes and tries Ninja and he's like, oh, the combat system is really awesome. Because he was on Archer. He's like, oh, so that's it, huh? Because it is very straightforward. Like, the early Bard levels are very straightforward. But what I like about it is like, you're highly mobile. And it feels easy to just keep moving.
Ahoy, Captain Tyler. I'm gonna weigh in with some interesting thoughts that I see in chat. It says maybe there should be some kind of synergy with Dancer, such as a song and dance kind of thing. I wouldn't mind some more synergies between the different jobs themselves. We see it with Dance Partner. They have. They have, especially where it was like certain kind of slashing damage, and that monk suffered in that point too, because we really don't have a blunt damage tank. Everything that is more slashing damage, and so monk back in the day was more blunt damage, and so we were always kind of speculating, will we see some kind of like big hammer wielding tank job that can kind of then synergize with a certain jobs. But yes, they have pulled away from that, but I think that that's something that you could see return in certain degrees, to where like all jobs actually synergize, but maybe in different ways. And that's something we've talked about here, just in terms of like, well, let's say you synergize with a dancer and a bard, you might have this benefit, but if you synergize with a bard and this, where essentially overall the synergy shouldn't obviously make or break the meta, but no matter what, somebody is still going to be like, this is the best synergy.
Yeah, it just doesn't feel as good as the other two. I think there are bard mains that are probably terribly offended right now, but like it does feel like that joke about Internet Explorer, where Internet Explorer is the #1 browser for installing other browsers. It's like, what is Bard best for? Oh my God, Bard is the best interest to Machinist and Dancer.
Yeah.
And it's like you can start as an archer, super great. As soon as you unlock Machinist and Dancer, which you cannot start as, then put that Bard away.
If bards are offended by what we were saying here, they've been offended for the last 2 years, and we haven't even spoken up about the job. It's like they're over there, and now they're just like, yeah, it kind of sucks. I don't like these guys and what they're saying, but it sucks because it's true. Like it sucks because we're speaking the truth.
And Shadowbringers, there was a number of statements made by the devs that they were trying to move away from the comps are fixed. You have to bring certain jobs. They want people to be able to play the classes that they feel that they want to play, and so adding synergies to Bard seems unlikely, because it seems to go against what their direction of the combat system has been.
Right.
And so since that is kind of what Bard needs, it kind of just leaves Bard in a weird spot where they're like, hey, we're moving away from jobs having as much unique utility. And every other job was like, oh, that's kind of a bummer. And Bard's like, that's all I did. Like,
yeah.
what do I do now?
And that's where it's like, what is the right interpretation of the job? And that's where I think if anybody was going to get a battle raise, it would be Bard, because they had one in my mind. When I look at where was the job at some point, we can sit here and say, yes, Bard offers this, and that makes it unique, especially in terms of prog, right? If you're a bard and you can cast a raise every whatever the trade-off is, right? Boom, there you go, there you have it. It'd be interesting. You bring up Reaper, that would be an interesting choice to have some kind of battle raise as well. And for me, I kind of default back to Paladin, kind of for a theming perspective overall. Now, there's all kinds of implications that brings in terms of balance and design, and that's where I think if they were going to get it, it would be a skill in the gap of 80 and 90. So a bard couldn't go into a level 50 dungeon and all of a sudden raise you, etc. So there would be, obviously some of that balance as to when the skills unlock, if they keep with the current syncing and skill system that they've got. Overall, Julie's main, my connection with Bard was I was always would work on Julie, cause she would level up Bard, get to cap, and then I'd help her with her rotations and her setup. And she just liked Bard. She liked the flexibility. She liked the song. She liked the theme. She liked how it is. And yes, she's not too worried about the meta. She was just like, I'm here to have fun. That's my meta.
She's a culinarian main that liked helping people in battle content.
Exactly. That's 100% who she was.
It's like, oh, so you're a culinarian with a bard.
Yeah. And so I think essentially what I'd like to see something brought in with Bard, so that when Endwalker it drops, that I think hopefully a lot of people look at that job again and give it the love it needs. Especially, I think one of the things when it comes down to Bard, Dancer, and Machinist, I don't see Machinist getting the overhaul that it got last time. I think it's in a really good spot. Some adjustments as always. Dancer, I think whenever a new job is introduced, they crush right out the gate. That's why I think Sage and Reaper are going to be really strong jobs no matter what. And then finally, I think within the three, as a kind of a trinity, you can look at what each one brings. And honestly, when you factor it, whenever you have that trinity, I look at the trinity of stats that people like. You've got, you crit, determination, and speed, right? So it's or direct hit, right? So it's you kind of have those three as your main stats. You could literally have each one kind of benefit the party in some way. This is great for longer term fights. This is great for fast, and this is great for maybe big hits or something of that nature. If you were ever going to look at from that, how we've kind of prioritized the different stats and who needs what in the game.
Yeah. It's just the one that feels like it's never quite found its spot. And a lot of times is that it establishes its identity in a way where you're like, oh, that's gonna be great. And then they make a large scale decision that is better for the long-term health of the game. like the jobs don't change, right? You said it was poised for what if we had a bow mage job as an option? What if machinist had fallen under it? Because machinist would either fallen, in my opinion, under marauder or under archer.
Yeah.
Archer is like, okay, this is the school of ranged, and Corsair being kind of a machinist option because the Marauder guild,
dude,
Corsair like there's literally gun signs in Marauder class hall from Corsair, which never existed.
Well, we're like from an aspect though, just so like we've been kind of teasing this all week as we get build up to kind of a limited job discussion, is that like Corsair I think would be a really good job from a limited system that could slot into that range, just like blue slots into caster. Corsair could slots right into the melee ranged, and then it's like you kind of think of like one limited job per role as the system evolves. Like it's weird saying that now because we are expecting it to happen, but it hasn't happened yet, and there's no like 2 points. We can't draw a line and kind of infer where we're going to go with the system until we get that second point.
I can't separate what a limited job is versus what a blue mage is, because the only limited job is blue mage, and so all of their qualities sum up both, as opposed to the moment we have a second point of data, we're like, oh, this is what makes a limited job, and then uniquely blue mage and uniquely whatever the next one is, if we ever get another one.
I do agree with Tess though, saying if machinist doesn't get chainsaw, gonna riot. So yeah, if you know Final Fantasy VI, lots of love. Chris, why don't you take us out?
Well, I mean, we'll continue on. Immediately after this, we're going to sit down and film the melee after saying hello to all these nuts in chat. And we'll take off. So we'll see you guys Friday. We'll be live about an hour before the live letter. That's, I think, 8 p.m. CST. And then we will go until the wee hours of the morning, because as soon as this thing finishes, we need to film a summary. It might be like a podcast.
The summary is the podcast, just so everybody knows. Literally, like Chris will be here on Twitch. We'll switch over to the podcast room, and then essentially we're going to record our summary, and then we'll split that up into the different segments for Work to Game so that you guys have that. And then the audio is going to go out as quickly as possible. So whether you like to watch on YouTube or listen, or you like to watch on Twitch or listen, or you just are like, hey, I got to go on a car trip this weekend, and great, you can listen in the car and you can get caught up on hopefully the amazing things that we'll be excited about. It should be freaking incredible. So as we wrap up, I do want to say thanks to Luke for making that a possibility. Luke did some generous donation and allowed us to kind of take the audio version of the podcast and separate it out and do all the cool things that we've been doing. So if you haven't subscribed to the audio podcast, search Crystal Core Radio wherever podcasts are found. I mean, wherever. I think your Samsung fridge has it, so you can find it. And honestly, when you do, give it a 5-star rating. You can do other stars, but if you can, 5-star rating would be amazing. It helps its discoverability in the audio for the world. Chris, you got any final thoughts?
No, you took over.
Yeah, I did.
I can outwait you. Oh wait, no, I can't. Super awkward ending. Just leave it. Just let it.
It's still going. I'm not going to stop. This is until you say like goodbye or something.
Yeah. Let's talk about melee.
All right, we're going to talk about melee, guys. See you soon.